What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for wrapping up your week with us. This is your Friday edition of Fantasy MLB Today. We are a sports ethos presentation, of course, and I'm your host, Joe Orrico. Make sure you're checking out everything we have on Twitter. You can follow me at Joe Orrico99, and you can check out everything we have at Sports Ethos over at Ethos Fantasy BB. Articles, podcasts, updates to the draft guide, pretty much every bit of baseball content we do share out over there. And you can check out in the description of this episode a link to our draft guide and check out everything we have to offer. There's some great stuff. Our draft tracker tool is probably the coolest part of it. It's got the ATC projections going in real time in the background, kind of comparing your team to the rest of the league. That's been a lot of fun to kind of play around with. So check that out if you haven't already. But today we are continuing with our position previews. I've been butchering the language all week, team previews, position previews. It's that time of year where we're just in a complete frenzy, but we have somebody who I think is probably the person in the fantasy industry who's more interested in catchers than probably anybody else. So it's great to talk to him today about some backstops. It is, of course, KC Bubba. You can find him over on Twitter at BDentric and doing a ton of different things. I'm going to let him lay it all out for you here in a second. Bubba, appreciate you making it work today, man. How you doing?
I am doing great. Thanks for having me, Joe. Always good chatting with you. We've actually been on the mic together quite a bit lately. It seems like doing different ventures, so it's been fun. And yeah, I'm ready to talk some catchers because hashtag catchers matter, people.
Yeah.
So remember that.
Catchers are a lot of fun. I think that a lot of what determines your catcher strategy is your format. If you're in a one catcher Yahoo league versus NFBC, it's going to completely change how that all works. We'll get into all that. But first, Bubba, I want to let you just plug anything you got going on, any upcoming articles or podcasts, whatever is in your world right now.
I guess the two biggest things in my world right now, obviously the Bubba and the Bloom podcast is kind of the thing that Ryan Bloomfield and myself are really going hard on. You've been in the listener leagues, you've live streamed with Ryan. I jumped in on and those kind of things. I also started my Substack this off season, and you can go check that out. It's KC Bubba on the Substack. I'm trying to do hopefully one thing a day or every other day or so to keep you updated on what's going on in baseball and fantasy baseball. Then I got a million other things. Bench with Bubba, the First Pitch podcast comes back next week. Baseball HQ, Fantasy Pro. So check me out on Twitter at BDentric. You'll get all the stuff there.
Bubba is all over the place. And speaking of fantasy pros, if you're interested, I'll be over there later today at 3 o'clock. We're doing a live mock draft with Pisa Pia and the Welsh, and then Chris Clegg will also be joining. It'll be a 12-team points league. If you guys are around 3 o'clock, want to check that out, we will be doing that. How have your drafts gone so far this year, Bubba? How have you been looking? I know you're probably close to I'm probably 13, 14 teams. Have you beaten me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm approaching the. We're getting closer to 20 than we are to 15. Let's put it that way. I have to go back and check. I know I have an auction I'm drafting tonight, Friday night. And then I have two more OCs. So that's already on the books. I'm trying not to do anything else, but every time I say that, yeah, we know how that goes. So it's going well. It's fun. Drafting's fun in general. That's the basics of it. But when you start early on to where you are now, watching the way the ADP changes, watching the way you personally learn the player pool and how you like to draft, learning where stats are, and so on and so forth, things change a ton. Like I live streamed for Bub and the Bloom my first OC on Thursday night, and it was pretty much different than any other draft I've done. And it's because of the pitching injuries to starters and relievers. It totally pushed things around, which adjusted the hitters. And it's just a lot of fun. That's what we do all our prep for, is to be able to bob and weave, I guess, through drafts. But yeah, it's been good. I'm ready for the season to start, though, and see if it was actually really good or not.
This is the first year I've actually drafted throughout the whole off season, so it's been really fun to follow along with the ever-changing ADPs, players jumping up and down. O'Neal Cruz went
Yes.
36th overall in my draft the other day, and I saw Jackson Holiday go top 100 in the draft. It's that time of year where people are really, really excited. But it has been something that's very unique, and I know most people aren't drafting throughout the whole off season. But just seeing those trends is something that I know not everybody's going to play in 15 leagues like we do. But if you can even play in one or two leagues throughout the offseason, just to take maybe advantage of some of those early ADPs. I have a 5th-round George Kirby share early in the offseason. Like those things just don't happen anymore. So you can have some kind of fun team builds throughout the year for sure if you are drafting with these different ADPs that we see going on. Um, Overall thoughts on the catcher position. Like I mentioned, Yahoo one catcher leagues versus NFBC leagues are going to be kind of different, but overall, what's your approach to catchers?
First off, it's the deepest that I've remembered in quite a while. And I know people say that a lot, so that's a common term, but I kind of a little backstory. The reason I enjoyed catchers so much is for Joe Pisapia, who you'll be recording with later on Friday. He does the Fantasy Black Book, and I've had the honor of writing for it, I think, 4 or 5 years now, and 4 for sure. And one of the positions every year I've done is catchers, because usually when you're the new guy, you get catchers, and it just stuck with me because I guess I somehow enjoy it. And back then when I started, it was abysmal. It was just so bad, and there was a lot of speculating, and it felt like closers almost at a point. But now it's just so deep. Like, I don't mind going about 16, 17 catchers deep if needed. There's obviously the quote unquote elite tier still, but there is a ton of up and coming young guys. We saw a lot of them last year. You could stream a ton of them last year. Now there's Yanner Diaz, one of the biggest streams last year. He's like a top 5 catcher this year. There's a lot of that going on, and we got some, again, young studs in Ohapi and Naylor and others that are sitting back there. We got your boys in Toronto, almost boy in Toronto now. There's a lot of options out there now where you still have a ton of quote unquote platoons, but some really, really good options behind the backstop.
So we're mostly NFBC players at this point. I still have a couple of leagues that are outside of the NFBC. Let's say the average person listening to the show is getting ready to draft their Yahoo league, their one catcher league. Are you taking an early guy and locking it down? Are you waiting until the last rounds and just kind of securing one of those later names? Because in the 12-team league, if you're taking the 12th catcher, like we're both pretty confident in the pool. Is that what you would recommend? Just kind of waiting on it?
If it's a roto format, I'm cool waiting on it. If it's a points league or a head-to-head, I'm leaning more so in getting a great guy.
Okay.
Because the one thing I will notice is when I did like my Tout Wars OBP style draft, yes, there's OBP all over baseball, but it really drops off at catcher. Like, because we taught catchers, like, okay, they hit 240, it's cool. They're catchers, it's good, and all these things. That also means they have like a 280, 290 OBP, and that'll crush your OBP team. So when it comes to like OBP, where points is kind of a similar landscape, I'd be a little more on the front end of things. But if it's just a standard roto 12 team, 10 team, whatever Yahoo format, one catcher format, I'm fine waiting. Even if it's a 15 team, I'm pretty much cool with the last guy if I have to, or at least waiting to get in that 10 to 15 range. I'm totally fine with that, because we'll get to him. But my favorite catchers here lies in that 10 to 15 range.
Just looking at my Tout Wars team, I couldn't remember who I took for my backstops. It was Bo Naylor and Ryan Jeffers. So
Yep, that's good.
not too bad there. Let's start breaking it down by tier. We're using NFBC Online Championship ADP, just looking from March 1st onward. Adley Rutschman, JT Realmuto, William Contreras, Will Smith, and Yainer Diaz are the guys that are generally top 100 picks. Although I have seen them kind of get pushed down a little bit. I'm in an NFBC 50 draft right now, which is a little bit different. The only catcher that went in the top 100 was Adley Rutschman. No other catchers went in the top 100. What are your thoughts on this tier? Have you been finding yourself drafting a lot of these guys throughout the season?
Usually not. Usually I'll wait till the next tier or so. But I jumped, like I said, I did an OC on Thursday night, and that's got an overall component.
Yeah.
So I'm much more wanting one of the big guys. I took William Contreras last night. I'm a huge William guy. I was all over him last year. He was the number 1 catcher in fantasy baseball, according to Razzball. And I love William Contreras. He hit almost 290 last year. 19 home runs. He's got more pop than that, but he hit for better average last year. He's developing as a hitter. So I really do like William Contreras. When it comes to like guys like Adley Rutschman, OBP through the roof, points league through the roof. Rutschman is amazing in that kind of format. And Roto is kind of just a dude, where maybe he takes another step, but the price you pay, I'm not in on. JTR is fine, but I'd rather have William Contreras. Will Smith, I've never been a Will Smith guy just because he's good, but he's not going to DH anymore with Ohtani there. So playing time is definitely kind of limited for Will Smith. And then I love Yainer, but that's a heck of a price bump when there's some guys going after him that I'm a fan of. I won't be opposed. Like, if you take Yainer and Contreras, and Yainer would be the 2 guys I would take in this range. But I just don't seem to have much Diaz this year, who I had in like all my NFBC 50s and DCs last year as my 3rd or 4th catcher. It just probably won't happen much this year.
Yeah, in this tier, I'm trying to think. I have one Adley Rutschman, and I've taken, and that was in Raz Slam, so that's points, so it's a little different. And then I took Yainer Diaz in a Gladiator. But yeah, I haven't really been going through this tier a lot. The guy that I kind of do like, and I think is a little underappreciated, might be JT Realmuto. He was a number 1 catcher for so long. I haven't seen anybody talk about him in that light anymore, but he's still the only catcher who's going to steal you, or one of the only ones who's going to steal double-digit bases. He's going to hit probably 260, good lineup. Any chance in your mind that JTR could finish as the number 1 catcher again, or do you think that ship has kind of sailed?
No, he could. Like, I'm not opposed to people that want to take him. I was still just, it's not in my repertoire, but I agree. He's one of the few catchers that will steal bases. He's still a power guy. He's getting older, so like the decline's going to slowly happen, but he's still going to be very, very good. So if you want maybe a 20 homer, 15 catcher, which is like a unicorn, that's definitely an option for you. It just depends on where he goes in drafts right now, and like, especially in 12-team formats, it's like a great round area for pitchers to go and stuff like that. So just dictates how you want to build your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Real Muto, I think I'm just a sucker for those out of position stolen bases and batting average, and it might, might start to decline a little bit. Those stolen bases might not be something we can bank on to the same extent that we always have with him. Um, I don't know. I think I'm kind of a sucker for Phillies in general. I find myself
It's
with
a
a lot of
good team.
Castellanos, a lot of Stott. I just really like that whole lineup as a whole. And I feel like they maybe don't get enough appreciation in that division just because the Braves are so good. But the Phillies lineup is damn impressive top to bottom as well.
Yep, I completely agree. I took Stott last night as my middle infielder early just for the upside he brings. An underdog, I have a lot of Philly stacks. They're going to score a ton of runs.
Yeah.
They just won the World Series a few years ago, folks. They make the playoffs. Like, I agree, the Braves get the love in the East and in the National League, but Phillies are a darn good baseball team. So I do not agree with that or disagree with that one bit.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun for sure. That first tier, generally speaking, I think that it's okay to avoid, especially because of how deep the position is, and certainly in one catcher leagues, a lot of the time you can kind of wait a little bit, and let's kind of move on to that next grouping of players. This one kind of like the 100 to 150 range by ADP, starting off with Sal Perez and going to Cal Raleigh, Francisco Alvarez, Wilson Contreras, and then Sean Murphy. I found myself not really interested in this range so much outside of Wilson Contreras. Wilson Contreras is one of my most drafted players. I've been a little bit worried about Sal Perez as he gets older. Raleigh and Alvarez, I like both of them, but they're both kind of sinkers to your batting average. Whereas I think Contreras is like a 250 guy. It's not as bad. What are your thoughts on this range as a whole, though, Bubba? Are you interested in any of these guys?
We're pretty much on the same page. I love Wilson Contreras at his ADP. He was banged up with a lot of kind of fluky injuries last year. They're going to DH him a lot more this season. They have Ivan Herrera, who we might talk about later, who's a great young catcher that's going to play a lot more. So Contreras, maybe if he gets to DH more often, gets to play more, which is fine because he even banged up last year, hit 20 home runs for the fourth straight season, hits for a decent average, like you said, in the middle of the batting order. Like, I'm a big fan of Wilson Contreras. Even gives you like 5 steals, which is
Yeah.
not that bad. So yeah, Contreras is my guy here. I agree. Raleigh could hit you 30 plus home runs with a 230 average if that's what you want. Fine. Salvi's deteriorating, in my opinion. Like, eventually it's going to fall off. But there's a lot of other profiles similar to Salvi later on at this position. Let's put it that way. And then Francisco Alvarez, that's like the kind of tough one for me. I don't really like the idea of a guy that hit 203 last year or something, but aren't many catchers with as much power upside as Francisco. And he's super young, so I understand the argument of maybe he's going to learn how to hit more. If he can hit 240, then he's Cal Raleigh. So that's cool. But again, like you said, not a profile I'm really into. So it's pretty much Wilson Contreras or bust in this range for me. And we're getting closer to the range where I just kind of go to town.
Like, to your point, like if Alvarez gets the batting average up, he could be Raleigh, and he's already being drafted in the same place as Raleigh. I just don't understand the point of that. The Mets lineup is also kind of, I think the Mets in general are just kind of a weird situation. There's always talk about maybe Alonso gets traded. I don't really expect it, but if he were to get traded, that's just going to bump down that lineup a little bit further. As of right now, who do you think has a better lineup on paper? Is it the Mariners or the Mets?
That's a fun one. I'm going to go Mariners just because I think,
Yeah.
I don't know, actually, I couldn't even tell you why for sure, but J-Rod, I think J-Rod already takes the cake as leading the whole situation there, but Lindor is good on the flip side. I'm going to go with the Mariners, though. They showed they can actually put more offense together last year. They've made a few changes to it because even Jorge Polanco, while healthy, would be a huge bump to that offense. Again, while healthy. Whereas the bumps in the Mets, it's Harrison Bader, who I don't mind late in fantasy, but for real life, let's be honest. So, yeah, give me the Mariners in that one.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. If you're going to go with one of those guys, it should be Raleigh. Sean Murphy also in this range. I don't know how much concern you have about this, but last year at the start of the season, Travis d'Arnaud was kind of the guy. Not full time; it was more of a split. But Darno was kind of getting the lion's share until he got hurt. Is that something we're going to see again, do you think? Or is Murphy kind of the guy at this point?
That's my concern, and I know people say because he tore it up when Darno got hurt. That's totally cool, and that's easy to see. But when Travis came back, they started splitting time again. Sure, Murphy got a little banged up, but they were splitting time right out the gate again. And people are saying, "Well, Murphy was hurt. That wouldn't have happened." And I'm like, "Are we sure?" Because that happened before the injury, like you said. So for me, I feel like this is more of a platoon situation than some want to give credit to. If I'm wrong, so be it. I'll be wrong on that one. Murphy's a pretty solid catcher, but I'm not drafting him anywhere because I am concerned it's more of a at least 2 out of 3 days Murphy starts. And I want like these catchers where you're drafting right now, they're not all 2 out of 3 day guys. That comes in the next few rounds, not right now. So Murphy's pretty much out for me.
Yeah, maybe you could argue. I wouldn't personally argue, but like the lineup outweighs some of that. If he loses 5 or 10 games or whatever, that the lineup would outweigh it. But Murphy also at times last year, especially the last month of the season, looked terrible.
Yeah.
I don't know, and I never really know how to parse the season together because they kind of are just arbitrary endpoints. The end of a month, the end of a week, the end of a season, even. But Murphy really ended poorly. It still, as a whole, was a pretty good season for him. But there's more risk than I think we are talking about with him, especially as a top 150 pick. That's the first 10 rounds. That's expensive stuff there for Murphy. But yeah, I think we're pretty lockstep there on both of those first couple of tiers. The back end C1s is what I've kind of labeled this next group, starting off with Gabriel Moreno, Logan O'Hoppe, and then we're going to Bo Naylor, Jonah Heim, Mitch Garver, Keibert Ruiz, Luis Camposano. These are kind of the 150 to 200 range. I'm getting the impression this is where you're doing a lot of your shopping.
This is a beautiful range if you can pull it off. Now, here's the conundrum: they're either your catcher two, or in the perfect world, before drafts got real serious here lately, I was getting 2 guys here pretty easily. Like I just double tap and walk away a happy man. Now it's getting a little different. People know me that they're in drafts, and that's annoying. So I either have to be more aggressive or I'm not getting my boys anymore. But my favorite guy this year is Logan O'Hoppe. I think it's been well talked about. If anybody's heard anything I've had to say, this guy is phenomenal. He got a nasty injury last year. Wasn't even really supposed to return last season, and he returned in a very big way, in my opinion, because we saw him play. In basically got hurt in April right out the gate. He played 16 games, comes back in August, 9 games, horrible. But then in September and October, the final month of the year, played 26 games, pretty much played a full workload for any catcher. That's like 26 games every month for every catcher. You'd be the happiest man alive. And then he hits 258 with 9 home runs, which he only hit 14 on the entire season. So he went to town like we expected him to be, because we knew there was a power source. In those 16 March and April games, he hit 4 home runs and hit 283. This dude is a very polished hitter. He's very young, too. He's 24 years old, which is great to see. So he's not going to steal any bags. Most catchers won't outside of JTR. You might get an occasional here and there. But Logan O'Hoppe legit has 25 home run power, I think, maybe more. Average that won't crush you. Will hit in the middle of an order now. Angels order. I get it. If you want to throw that one at me, totally understandable. That's not pretty. But on paper, it's not bad if it actually kind of, at least the top half, shouldn't be horrible. So I love Logan O'Hoppe. Tremendous fan of Logan O'Hoppe. I'll give you a few cliff notes on these other guys real quick. Gabriel Moreno, love the skill set. Playoff helium is one thing. I'm just super concerned because most of his hits go left center to right center, which is dead zone in Arizona. In the playoffs, he pulled the ball. That was great. Is that sustainable? I don't know. I'll probably miss on that one. But he might be like a year away type thing with Gabriel Moreno, or I could just be a year behind. It could be a me thing. Bo Naylor, love as well. This dude is an absolute. I'm honestly surprised he's going this late, but I guess it's either the depth of the catcher position or people just still hate catchers. One of the two. But Bo Naylor is literally the tale of kind of 2 seasons. When you look at Bo Naylor, we had the first half where he kind of gets his feet wet for 15 games, and then he keeps going in August and kind of slow. But only hit 203 in August. People were like, pitchforks were out. Got to get rid of this kid. And like, God forbid you let this young player get comfortable at the big league level. Final month of the season, played 19 games. Remember I said O'Hoppe played 26. That's the dream scenario. 19 still good. And now it'll be better this year because his backup's Austin Hedges. And if they start Austin Hedges, then you can just fire Stephen Vogt now. That's the reality of it. But September and October, we saw a 304 batting average with 4 4 of his 11 home runs that month. And the big thing, this is the fun one, folks, 4 stolen bases. If we're looking for a catcher that can steal, I've made the comp, like this is who we wanted Dalton Varsho to be. This power speed next JTR type guy, that is who Bo Naylor is, folks. This kid is a pure hitter that can run as well. Like you look at the projection sites, they don't do Bo Naylor justice. They don't do most catchers justice. Let me just paraphrase that now. Playing time is rough, and they have gotten better. The BATX is up to 118, ATC is up to 116. It's a little better. I still think he plays more like 130. Again, Austin Hedges, why? But they have him for a very low batting average, which is I don't agree with. They have him for 15 homers, 7 steals. Projecting young players is tough because a lot of people use 3-year averages, and that doesn't exist for these guys. So Bo Naylor, huge fan. In a perfect world, I have Logan O'Hoppe, Bo Naylor. Leave a draft with that. I'm happy. Doesn't always work, though. But that's the perfect world. And then I'll wrap it up for you. Jonah Heim, I think this is the last. How far down did you go? Campusano?
Campusano, yeah.
Okay, well, I'll try to speed through these then for you.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
Jonah Heim, I actually still really like. I don't know, for a guy that had 97 RBIs, yes, regression will hit. That's very difficult to do at the catcher's position, but in that offense, 75 to 80 seems kind of doable still. Power's legit. Dude had a freak injury, came back. I don't know why Jonah Heim's going this late. If he doesn't get hurt, Jonah Heim's drafted around Kyle Raleigh probably. So to me, Jonah Heim's a fun one to sit with. Again, the backup situation there shouldn't scare you. So Jonah Heim, I guess, is another one of those guys where he should play a ton. You have Mitch Garver going right after Jonah Heim. He should DH in Seattle, play occasionally when Cal Raleigh needs a day off. Don't mind it. Garver's always been great when healthy. The when healthy part is the problem with Mitch Garver. Maybe it's the Minnesota Twins disease, which we've seen with Buxton and everybody that plays there. We'll see how that goes in Seattle. Garver's fine. I just get nervous about the PT when you have a Hyman in front of him, you have Naylor in front of him. And then kind of a guy, if you're missing out on catchers, I think he's one of the best catcher twos in the draft is Kyber Ruiz. A guy that was one of the big pieces when traded over to the Nationals a few years ago from the Dodgers. Everyone said he's a bat first guy, batting average guy, whatever. He hit 260 last year, which is excellent. And the people were speculating, well, the power might not come. And I kept saying, well, he was 23, he's getting older. I'm always more on the optimistic, let these guys, develop thing. He went up to 18 home runs last year. It was big. And it's big because he does it while striking out around 10% of the time. Like he's another, like we'll talk about your boy Kirk in a little bit. You don't find a lot of great plate skills usually at the catcher's position. He excels at plate skills. So even if the power doesn't always, come into play, he's gonna good eye at the plate. He's gonna get on base. He's gonna, make good contact. A lot of things that are hard to find at the catcher's position. The catcher's position will have batting average sinks at times. When it comes to Kyber Ruiz, he's not going to be a batting average sink. 260 at catcher is awesome. Like if you're talking another position, maybe not a catcher. That's great. Run with it. So I love Kyber Ruiz as a catcher too. Luis Campusano is a fun catcher too as well. Hit really well on a short sample last year because he was hurt off and on. Going to be the catcher 1 now in San Diego, which gives a ton of upside to Campusano. I wouldn't expect the 300 average we saw in the small sample, but 275, very doable. There's a lot of power there if he can unleash it. So Campusano is kind of that one guy, like the way I felt about Yainer Diaz last year. If he can click, he can make a big jump. Campusano is one of those later round catchers that if he can put it together and click, he's going to make a huge jump come draft day next year. So I love this range. Naylor, O'Hoppe, Ruiz, Campusano. I am targeting a lot of those. If you think a trend there, young catchers that are still developing. If I'm going to wait on any position, this isn't just a catcher thing, and you have a pretty solid base in play, take a chance on the young guy or two that is guaranteed. Like I'm not saying some guys that might not play, like Kobe Mayo. That's another story because you don't know if he's going to play. These guys are playing. They're the starting catchers for their team. Let them develop for you and make it happen. So big fan of this range.
I think I agree with pretty much everything you said here in this range. It's where I've been consistently shopping. A couple of Nailers, a couple of Garvers, a couple of Ruizes. I've drafted Luis Campusano once. I don't know. Is he still messing around with those weird batting stances, or was that just something that he's done with?
Last I saw, he wasn't. Trust me, when I first saw that, when spring training opened, I was just like, what did you do to all my player shares? Like, you were hitting fine. And then he started hitting a few home runs and stuff. And, maybe he was getting beamed by pitches and stuff. So maybe it's something for him. And I don't know. But yeah, it wasn't making me feel warm and fuzzy when I saw it. That's for sure. I thought this was like a scene out of Major League, and Roop, the catcher from Major League 2, was having trouble throwing the ball. Well, Campusano changed his swing to do something. It was weird, very weird.
You've mentioned with a few players in that tier, just kind of like the out of position stats that you're going to get, the steals with Naylor and Moreno, and the batting average with Ruiz. Is that something that you put a lot of stock into, out of position stats? Not maybe even just with catcher, but in general, if you're able to get steals from first base or whatever it is, do you put a lot of stock into that kind of build?
I would say I put a lot of like it'd be like a good tiebreaker if I'm at a certain thing. I'm not focusing on it, but it definitely helps. Like for my rankings, they might move up a couple guys type thing. It is definitely there. But when I'm in the draft room, if the rest of my drafts going a certain way, and I'm not desperate for steals per se, I'm not going to force it just because this guy gets some steals. But
Yeah.
it is a massive plus if you can get steals at a corner position, a catcher position. That just helps your team out as a general consensus. So I do think it is valuable. And batting average is something I'm trying to focus more on this year because I always just kind of put it to the side, and then you look at September and go, oh yeah, that's why I'm in third place. Okay, gotcha. So yeah, I'm trying to be more focused on that the best I can.
I've done that a lot this year too. Batting average has been something that's really, really important to me. And I think it's just because I've heard so many people mention it and it's become drilled into my brain that you are actively hurting your batting average pretty much every time you stream a player. Pretty much every time. You're not streaming these 280, 290 guys. They're going to be the 220, 230 batters for the most part. You got to set yourself up with a really good base on draft day if you can. And if you're able to take a guy like Bo Naylor, and I agree the projections on Naylor are too low for batting average specifically. He could easily be a 250, 260 guy. You're able to get Naylor hypothetically and Ruiz and have a 260 batting average from your catcher, not to mention some stolen bases. I mean, that's something that I really, really like. It doesn't always work out for you. Sometimes these guys get a little expensive or you miss out or whatever. But I put a lot of stock into it. Doesn't have to be like you're getting 30 steals with your catcher. That's not going to happen. But even just a few, most of them are giving you zero. If you're able to get five, Wilson Contreras five, or whoever six, four, three, it might not seem like a lot, but it really does make a big difference, I think, there. But yeah, that range is just filled with goodies, I think. Moving on to like the last group, the scraps, the C2s, sometimes not even worthy of being C2s. Tyler Stevenson, Ryan Jeffers, Elias Diaz, Langoliers in Oakland, the two Blue Jays catchers, and we'll talk about that because Danny Jansen got hurt today. Austin Wells, Jake Rogers. These are kind of just the scraps. Anybody here that you think could potentially work their way into a C1 territory this year, or people that you're drafting a lot?
Yeah, there's one guy I actually weirdly have a lot of shares of here. It's usually because I draft the people, like I said, that know me and they take my players. So when I play the chicken game and lose, I am stuck here. And Ryan Jeffers is that guy. 96 games last year. We saw him hit 276, 14 homers. That might be, a fluky thing after we saw weird averages. And we did see 14 homers in 2021. I don't think it's as fluky as we think, though, because Ryan Jeffers, A, was 26 last year, and B, became kind of the full-time guy. So he might be developing into something. So say we don't see 276, but what if we see 250? That's very doable. And again, if we can somehow get 14, 15 home runs out of the mix, I'll take that all day. If we're shopping in this world of catchers, and he weirdly hits kind of like fifth or sixth some days in Minnesota because that's a whole nother situation there. So Ryan Jeffers, I don't mind. People will look at Elias Diaz. I get it, but he's on the decline in my mind. Shane Langoliers, weirdly enough, is going to platoon with Tyler Soderstrom. We'll see how long that lasts for. But the Oakland management flat out said Soderstrom, who was a big time prospect of ours, we want to see him catch. So it'll be he's a left-handed hitter. Yeah, they're the opposites. That's all I remember. So they will platoon. So keep that in mind. Kirk, I kind of comped him earlier to Kyber Ruiz. Great plate discipline, by 15-ish home run pop, maybe more. Really good batting average type stuff there from Kirk. And now looks like he'll play a ton. We'll talk about that in a second. I'll give you the floor there. Austin Wells, if I knew he would be the guy in New York, I actually like his upside a lot, kind of how I gave my speech about young players, let them develop. Austin Wells, I like a ton. Even in a small sample last year, we saw a little bit of the pop. There's good bat skills. Trevino's still technically the catcher one. I eventually think it's going to be Austin Wells' job. So if you need to speculate in deeper formats, he's there. If not, just watch the waiver wires. He'll be a fun pickup if he does get that job. And then Jake Rogers, if you just need power late, sure. he's literally like the last desperation heave if you're going somewhere. And I do have a share or two in 15s. That's just the reality of the situation. But for the most part in this range, it's Jeffers and a last ditch on Rogers if necessary. But Kirk will come into the fold now. So would you like to talk about that? Because now Kirk almost moves into the tier above this with the news we've got today, for me at least.
Well, I've been waiting all off season to talk about Alejandro Kirk. He's my guy, right? I'm a somewhat of a homer, I guess you could say, for the Blue Jays, although that's kind of going away over these last couple of years, just seeing the way that they treat my team. But Alejandro Kirk is now in a position where he's probably going to be looking at the lion's share of the playing time. Where going in, even just as of yesterday, we thought it was going to be more of a split between him and Danny Jansen. But Danny Jansen literally has magnets inside of him, and he cannot help himself. He gets hit with it's not even his fault. I can't blame it on him. But the guy is super, super, super injury prone. Even if he does come back when they're expecting in a couple of weeks, it's just until the next thing pops up. And I hate to be pessimistic about it, but that's just kind of what it is with Danny Jansen. Alejandro Kirk, just last year, his projections were absolutely insane. We're coming off of a year where he was starred in the All-Star game in the American League, and last year was absolutely awful. But I do think there's some middle ground there. And like you mentioned, you're still getting good batting average. I think he's probably like a 12, 13 home run guy. He's nothing crazy, but I think with the more playing time you're going to be getting out of him now, that volume should secure him as a maybe a back end C1, high end C2. Where do you think he is right now in catcher rankings? I haven't updated it with Jansen, but what do you think? 15 or so, 16?
Yeah, I'd still have him around catcher 2. Like I said, I'd probably put him up there with Kyber Ruiz range, so 15, 16, give or take.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and look at my catch rankings, and I'm updating all my rankings this weekend. And I'd have him near Kyber Ruiz. They're almost like the Spider-Man gift to me if Kirk plays enough. Like they're pretty much the same player to me.
The problem with the Jays as well, the lineup sucks. The lineup is awful. The bottom third of the order is going to be Kiermaier, Biggio, and Kiner Falefa. And Kirk is probably going to be batting right ahead of those guys. So last year, he kind of struggled in terms of the counting stats. I don't know that that's necessarily going to go away. But to your point, he is pretty much Keibert Ruiz going 100 picks later than Keibert Ruiz. Probably still a better lineup in Toronto than Washington. If you want to go that route of kind of securing batting average late, wouldn't you just wait a few more rounds and then take Kirk over Ruiz, you think?
But I'm just thinking if this injury is as serious as it sounds, if you give it about a week, they'll be going next to each other. So
Yeah.
enjoy it for this week, but that will quickly change. I have a hunch. Like I was telling Joe off air in my OC on Thursday night, Alejandro Kirk went at pick 267, where Jansen went to pick 330. Kyber Ruiz went at pick 177, so 90 picks before Alejandro Kirk. I think that shrinks tremendously over the next week, maybe even sooner.
You're probably right. A guy we haven't mentioned, and I don't think he's very good, don't get me wrong, but I think he's probably going to play, and that's Connor Wong. He's going to give you some stuff. Again, it goes back to my out of position stats kind of thing. He's going to steal some bases. I think he's going to play fairly regularly. Not somebody that is like you're pushing up draft boards, but if you're punting catcher and your last pick or two is Connor Wong as your C2, is that something you can get behind?
15 team leagues, yes.
Yeah.
12 teams, I hope you're not in that situation. Let's put it that way. But I agree. You'll get maybe 10-ish home runs. We've seen in the minors, he's hit up to 15. So he had 9 for the Red Sox last year in 126 games. That's where he was all over, even played second base at times last year. Dude was all over the place. He will be the primary catcher this year, so I do like that call. Batting average, hopefully you get 240, but there's maybe 10 and 10 there. He will get you steals. He will get you much more than most guys, especially at the end of the catcher pool. So that is a good shout on Connor Wong. I remember writing him up as a up and comer, I believe, this past year in the Black Book.
Yeah, I mean that's if you go full punt as well. He's been drafted in only 5 of the last 51 online championships. So
he wasn't drafted. He wasn't drafted last night for me.
Yeah, he'll be there if you did want him. Not to say that he's massive.
He's a good streamer. If you have a catcher go down, he's a great one to go take a peek at.
Yeah. You mentioned Ivan Herrera earlier. I'll give you the floor there if you want to kind of just wax poetic on him for a second.
Yes, to me, he's this year's Yainer Diaz, where we're just waiting for the playing time to crack situation. And with the news, like even before they announced it, I was kind of speculating it and stuff I was writing in December of they want Wilson Contreras to play more. So DH is on the table there. He's getting a bunch of fluky injuries, which DH might not even help with some of the injuries he had, but they want Herrera to play. Like small samples, but he had 297 in 13 games with the Cards last year in AAA, 10 homers, 11 steals at 297. We've seen some power, some speed. He's 24 years old. We know the Cardinal system likes to keep developing these catchers. They saw it with, they thought it was going to be Kisner. It didn't work out, but it also didn't work out because you had Herrera here. And the reason I like Herrera the most is even with Wilson Contreras last year, playing 126 games, I believe it was, you had Kisner playing over 100 games at the same time. Again, the DH catcher situation there, but Kisner, no, he played 70 games last year. Sorry. He had 97 the year before. That's what it was. So they have no problem. Like even 70 games for a backup's great. It's just a small tweak to get Herrera up over 100 games played. And if you're talking over 100 games played, we go to the back end of those catchers we talked about here, and we're back in business as a catcher two potential. I'm not saying that yet. Right now, he's a stream only for me because Wilson's still there. But the second, God forbid, Wilson gets an injury, the second they just say we're going to DH Wilson and play Herrera 3 to 4 times a week, things get a lot more interesting in the Ivan Herrera world because the hit tool is legit. It's just a need for playing time. So he is that kind of Yainer Diaz guy just waiting to burst through the playing time ceiling.
I might have to get a shirt made that says this too at some point, but the Cardinals lineup was very good last year for most of the season. They struggled because Miles Michaelis was their ace, but they actually were a top 10 offense for most of the year. But I think they ended up as like 12th or 13th in terms of a lot of metrics, but that was because of a bad September. If you can get a piece of that order, especially off the waiver wire, potentially 100 games out of Herrera there. Yeah, like you said, it's just somebody to kind of monitor for now, but could end up being pretty interesting. Is there anybody in the catcher pool that we've glossed over that you think is somebody that the average fantasy player should know about this year?
Not really. Freddie Freeman is kind of another catcher in Kansas City, similar to the Herrera world, where he's a very, very good hit tool. And with Salvi Perez potentially DHing a ton more, Fermin might find his way to enough playing time to become fantasy viable as well. Strictly a waiver wire guy for now, but there is a point where we could see this flourish. He played in 70 games last year. Salvi's, like I said, going to DH more and more. So he's another guy in the Herrera vein. I like Herrera more, but for me, might get the chance beforehand type thing. He'd be another young guy to keep an eye on. But for the pockets we discussed, I think we hit on most of them in a roundabout way. We went was it almost 25 catchers. If you're still going this deep, like I'm not taking Rene Pinto, Patrick Bailey, maybe. That's just a soft spot of mine, but. Yan Gomes, I guess there's one I will give you. Yan Gomes does not get his love. He's a very good batting average asset, okay power in a pretty good Chicago Cubs lineup, actually. So Yan Gomes would be a guy. He's still the catcher one there until Miguel Amaya hopefully takes it over. So you've kind of heard my trend here. Herrera, Fermin, Amaya, those like 3 of the catchers, just put on your watch list. The second they get playing time will become very valuable in fantasy.
Absolutely. Now, something I've kind of been asking everybody this week during these previews. Let's say you're doing one draft or you're advising somebody for their single draft of the year. They're doing one Yahoo 12-team league. Who's their catcher? You get to choose their one catcher, and you get to choose one person that they are absolutely just staying away from. Who are the names for you?
Your number one catcher is Logan O'Hoppe, based on price and production alone. That's who we are taking 100 times out of 100 if I have my choice. And who I'm staying away from, that is fun. That's really fun because you can go really wrong here. It's probably Sean Murphy for me, honestly, because I'm just really concerned about that playing time situation. So I'll go wrong and I'll be with Sean Murphy as my don't touch and get all the Logan O'Hoppe you possibly can.
I think I'm pretty locked up there with you. I may end up saying like Alvarez, and
that was the other option besides Murphy. I was looking at Alvarez.
Yeah. We're locked up here. We're pretty in sync on the catcher position, and that's what Bubba focuses on a lot is catchers. Of course, he focuses on everything in fantasy baseball, but he does have a soft spot for catchers. Yes. But I really do appreciate you making the time today, man. It's always great to catch up with you.
Yep, anytime, man. Always love chatting with you. You guys got something good going over here, and hey, I get invited to talk catchers. You know, I'm around for that, so let's do it.
Make sure you're following Bubba over on the Twitter at BDentric. I'm at Orrico99, but I do want to give you just one more chance here in case there's anything else you want to just remind the folks of, podcasts, articles, and the like.
Yeah, just check me out on Twitter at BDNTrick, Bubba and the Bloom Pod, my Substack, and everything else will be tweeted out over there. So go check that out. Help support everybody, help Joe's cause, help my cause, help them all. And thanks for having me, my friend.
Always a blast. What you should be doing, everybody. I know everybody would love you to spend money, but just leave reviews, leave ratings and reviews on podcasts. It doesn't cost you a thing. Hit the 5-star button, couple of kind words. I saw a lot of people have been leaving reviews for you and Ryan, and that's really great to see. It's the best way that you can help out, and it takes about 5 seconds. So if you can go ahead and do that, we'd really appreciate it. And check out in the description of the episode the link to our draft guide. A lot of fun stuff from myself, from Ben Tidd, and from the rest of the staff here at Sports Ethos. But we will be back again on Monday. Should be starting pitchers, but we're still working a few things out. But until then, everybody, take care and have a great weekend.